They left my daughter alone on her 9th birthday while they took their real granddaughter to a theme park. What she did when they came back changed everything. If you've ever been made to feel like an outsider in your own family, this story will stay with you long after it ends. Hannah gripped the steering wheel with both hands, the familiar road home unfurling beneath her tires like a well-worn ribbon. The spring sun filtered through budding trees, casting dappled shadows across the pavement. She rolled down the window slightly, letting the fresh air cool her face. Her mind raced, but not with work, not anymore. Her meetings in Chicago had ended a day early, an unexpected but welcome reprieve, and all she could think about was seeing Ava. The idea of surprising her daughter, of walking through the front door unannounced and seeing her eyes light up, was enough to ease the tightness in Hannah's shoulders. It had been a tough week, packed with high-stakes presentations and back-to-back client dinners, but the thought of Ava's small arms flinging around her waist made it all worth it. She hadn't told Ethan either. He was still in Boston, caught up in last-minute meetings of his own. This would be just her and Ava, an early reunion, an unexpected moment of softness in their often overbooked lives. As she turned onto their street, Hannah's lips curled into a quiet smile. She imagined Ava sitting at the kitchen table, doodling or reading one of her favorite animal books. Maybe she'd be making bracelets again, her little fingers looping beads with a concentration that rivaled most adults. Hannah pictured her daughter's face, looking up surprised, joyful. It would be a perfect moment. But the second her car pulled into the driveway, the warmth in her chest curdled. Robert and Eleanor's SUV was gone. They were supposed to be with Ava. Hannah had left her daughter in their care reluctantly after a long debate with Ethan. She'd hesitated, something about their manner, the way they looked at Ava, but in the end, practicality had won. The babysitter was out of town, her mother couldn't fly in on such short notice, and Ethan had insisted his parents could handle 3 days with their granddaughter. So, where were they? She stepped out of the car, her heels clicking against the driveway, and approached the front door. The house stood still, unusually quiet for mid-afternoon. No sound of television, no laughter, no music. Her hand hesitated on the doorknob before she pushed it open. "Ava," she called gently. No answer. She stepped inside and immediately felt it, the kind of silence that wasn't peace but absence. A void. Her suitcase thudded softly against the wood floor as she dropped it. "Sweetheart, it's Mommy," she called again, her voice rising slightly. Still no answer. She moved through the living room. Empty. Ava's stuffed rabbit, Mr. Flopsy, lay abandoned on the couch, a red flag in itself. That toy never left Ava's side. The dining room showed signs of a quick lunch, a half-empty glass of juice crumbs scattered across the table. The kitchen, however, was where the sound came from, faint, rhythmic, and oddly desperate. A soft sniffle. The scratch of bristles. Hannah froze in the doorway. There on her hands and knees was Ava. The 8-year-old was hunched over a bucket of cloudy, soapy water, scrubbing the white tile floor with a stiff brush. Her small hands were red and raw. Her knees, visible through damp pink leggings, were blotched with angry patches. Her curls clung to her face, which was streaked with tears and sweat. Her lips moved, muttering something inaudible, maybe a song, maybe a mantra to get her through. Hannah's breath caught. It felt like the world stopped spinning. "Ava," she whispered. The little girl flinched as if the word had struck her. The brush fell from her hand with a plastic clatter. She turned slowly, her eyes wide with disbelief and fear. "Mommy," she said, her voice so small it barely registered. Hannah crossed the room in 3 strides, kneeling on the wet floor without a second thought. "Baby, what are you doing?" she asked, already gathering her child into her arms. "I spilled grape juice this morning," Ava whispered, her voice shaking. "Grandma said it was a big mess. She said I had to clean the whole kitchen, to learn responsibility." Hannah pulled her closer, feeling every tremble in the small frame pressed against her. Ava clung to her shirt, burying her face in Hannah's chest like she hadn't done in years. "Where are they now?" Hannah asked quietly, but with an edge she couldn't hide. "They took Lily to Adventure World," Ava said. "Grandma said I couldn't go. She said I wouldn't appreciate it like Lily would." She said, "Lily deserves special treats because she's their real granddaughter." The words hit Hannah like a slap across the face. Her arms tightened around Ava. How long have you been alone? She asked, trying to keep the fury from her voice. Since after breakfast. I think Grandma said I had to finish before they got home. She said I was always so clumsy and I needed to think about why I keep messing things up. Ava's voice cracked and fresh tears welled in her eyes. Hannah pulled back just enough to cup her daughter's face. No, she said, firmly wiping a tear away with her thumb. Listen to me, you didn't do anything wrong. Spilling juice is not a crime. And no one has the right to treat you like you're less than. Do you hear me? Ava looked at her eyes wide. But I'm not really a Henderson, not like Lily is. Hannah's throat burned. Ava, you are mine. You might not have come from my tummy, but you came straight from my heart. I chose you. And I will keep choosing you every single day for the rest of my life. For a long moment, Ava didn't speak. Then slowly she leaned in, resting her forehead against her mother's. Promise, she whispered. With everything I have, Hannah said, her voice trembling. There on the soapy tile floor of their quiet kitchen, Hannah made a vow. She would no longer stay silent to keep the peace. She would no longer downplay the subtle cruelties that had chipped away at her daughter's spirit. She would no longer allow anyone, family or not, to make Ava feel unwanted, unimportant, or unloved. Blood didn't make a family, love did. And Hannah was ready to fight for hers. After Ava had been bathed, fed, and tucked into bed that night, Hannah remained in the kitchen, her fingers curled around a lukewarm mug of tea that had long since stopped steaming. The house was finally still, but not in a way that comforted her. The silence now felt like a vacuum, echoing all the emotions she couldn't let out in front of her daughter. Her gaze wandered to the floor where hours earlier she'd found Ava kneeling like a prisoner of shame, her tiny arms aching from punishment she never deserved. Hannah had cleaned it since, but somehow the shame still clung to the tile like a stain no soap could scrub away. Her thoughts drifted backward, not just to the start of the week or even to the day she had married Ethan, but to the very beginning, the day a frightened 3-year-old girl had looked up at her with grief-filled eyes. Changed Hannah's life forever. Claire had always been more than a cousin. They were practically raised as sisters, the kind who finished each other's sentences and knew each other's secrets before they were ever spoken aloud. When Claire and Jeremy died in that sudden car crash on a fog-slicked mountain road, Hannah had been just 24, single, living in a 1-bedroom apartment, working crazy hours as a junior marketing associate and struggling to keep her plants alive, let alone imagine raising a child. But family court wasn't concerned with readiness, they were concerned with blood, and Ava had no other place to go. Hannah had walked into the courthouse, expecting to sign a few papers, maybe provide temporary care until something more permanent was found. But then she saw Ava in the waiting room, tiny, curled in a vinyl chair, clutching a stuffed giraffe by the neck. Her cheeks were still streaked with the dried residue of tears, her voice barely audible when she looked up and whispered, "Auntie Hannah." That moment rewired something in Hannah. Something ancient and maternal woke up like it had been there all along, waiting. Ava had not asked to be chosen, but she was. The process of adoption was anything but quick. There were background checks, home inspections, court hearings. Hannah moved to a cheaper apartment, sold half her wardrobe to pay legal fees, and rearranged her work schedule so she could be home in time for bedtime stories. There were sleepless nights when Ava cried for a mother she no longer had, and days when Hannah questioned if she was enough. But through every moment, love bloomed quietly, persistently, like grass pushing through concrete. Ava wasn't an obligation. She was a gift. 2 years later, Hannah met Ethan. It was a Saturday barbecue at her coworker's house, burgers on the grill, kids darting between folding chairs, someone playing 80s hits on a Bluetooth speaker. She hadn't planned on going. Ava had been cranky that morning, and Hannah had nearly canceled, but she didn't. And that decision changed everything. Ethan had arrived late, balancing a homemade lemon pie and a 6-pack of local IPA. He was charming in a quietly disheveled way, shirt slightly wrinkled, shoes a little scuffed, but his smile was real. And when he spotted Ava sitting alone on a picnic blanket, he walked right over and asked if she wanted to help him name his pie. "I'm thinking something fancy," he said, kneeling to her level. Like Princess Lemonella III, Ava had burst into giggles. Hannah watched the two of them from across the yard and felt something shift. Ethan didn't ask about Ava's situation. He didn't treat her like a footnote in Hannah's life. He asked about Ava's favorite animals, what color unicorns should be, and whether clouds had flavors. And later, when Hannah apologized for her daughter's shyness, he waved it off with a smile. "She's not shy," he said. "She's just careful. That's a good thing." He showed up again the next weekend, and the weekend after that. He brought coloring books, made pancakes shaped like dinosaurs, and offered to read bedtime stories using ridiculous voices for every character. Ava adored him. And so did Hannah. When Ethan proposed 2 years later, it wasn't just Hannah he was committing to, it was Ava too. He chose to do it in the park where Ava had learned to ride her bike, the same trail where Hannah had run beside her, cheering every wobble. That day, Ethan knelt on one knee with not one but 2 small velvet boxes. The first held a modest diamond ring, classic and understated. The second was smaller, a silver heart-shaped locket with Ava's initials etched inside and a tiny photo of all 3 of them tucked within. "Hannah," he'd said, his voice catching, "I want to spend my life with you. But this isn't just about us. Ava, will you let me be part of your forever too?" Ava had gasped, then flung her arms around his neck so hard he nearly toppled over. Hannah had cried then too, not because it was a surprise, but because it felt so right. There was no performance, no grand audience. Just the 3 of them under rustling leaves and an open sky, promising each other something eternal. They married that fall in a small ceremony wrapped in golden trees and crisp air. Ava walked down the aisle ahead of Hannah, scattering leaves from a hand-woven basket, her curls bouncing with each step. During the vows, she stood between them, holding their hands, her smile wide enough to light the entire day. And when the judge signed the final adoption papers months later, changing Ava's last name to match theirs, Hannah had framed the moment like it was sacred. Because to them it was. They weren't just mother and daughter. They were a family. Not in the way genetics might define it, but in every way that mattered more. That's why what happened today on that cold tile floor had struck Hannah so deeply. It wasn't just about chores or favoritism. It wasn't just that her daughter had been left alone, punished, humiliated. It was that Ava had been made to question whether she truly belonged. And that shattered something in Hannah that she wasn't sure could ever be fully repaired. She stood now in the quiet kitchen and looked at the empty staircase, knowing Ava was finally sleeping soundly upstairs. She wouldn't forget today. Neither of them would. But she would make damn sure it wasn't the end of their story, it was the turning point. Because family wasn't built on bloodlines, it was built on love. And Hannah had never been more certain of anything in her life. Hannah had always known that Eleanor and Robert weren't the warmest people, but for the longest time she chalked it up to generational differences. They were formal, distant, the kind of people who sent cards instead of making calls, who brought flowers to birthdays but never stayed for cake. They were cordial and polite, never outright rude, but there was a certain tightness in their smiles that Hannah could never quite shake. She'd first met them over brunch at a country club shortly after Ethan had introduced her and Ava as the women he hoped would become his family. Eleanor wore pearls and a stiff blazer despite the warm spring day, while Robert seemed more at home, laughing lightly over golf jokes with Ethan. But the moment Ava had tried to speak something about a duck she saw in the pond outside, Eleanor had offered only a vague, absent nod, her attention drifting instead to a server pouring more coffee. "She's a pretty little thing," Eleanor had said later, examining Ava with a look that felt more clinical than admiring. "Doesn't look much like either of you though, does she?" The comment had stung more than Hannah let on. Ethan had jumped in to explain simply and unapologetically that Ava was adopted. Hannah appreciated the ease in his voice, the absence of shame. But Eleanor had only nodded once sharply and changed the subject. At first, Hannah told herself it was just unfamiliarity. Ava was new to them. They needed time. Eleanor and Robert had only ever had sons. Maybe they didn't quite know how to relate to a little girl. Maybe they were just reserved. Maybe Hannah was overreacting. Then Lily was born. Ethan's younger brother, Michael, and his wife had welcomed their daughter just 2 months after Ava's 4th birthday. From the beginning, the girls were compared. Subtly at first, height, vocabulary, who potty trained earlier. "Lily already knows her letters," Eleanor would say proudly at family gatherings. "She's so advanced for her age." No one ever asked about Ava's milestones. As the girls grew older, the comparisons sharpened. Ava and Lily were the only children at most Henderson family events, so naturally they ended up playing together. In the early years, they got along well enough. Ava, ever eager to please, followed Lily's lead, shared her toys, and tried to match her energy. Lily, spirited and confident, was used to being the star. But Hannah began noticing things that made her stomach knot, things she wasn't sure how to address without sounding petty. At Christmas one year, Eleanor and Robert presented 2 elaborately wrapped boxes, one for each girl. Lily's was the size of a small suitcase and revealed a brand new tablet with a pink protective case. Ava's was smaller, a stack of coloring books and a 24-pack of crayons. Crayons, not even markers. Hannah had felt her face flush, but Ava had smiled anyway, thanking them politely. Later that night, as Ava quietly colored in the corner while Lily played a game on her tablet, Hannah overheard Eleanor saying, "See, she's so content with the simple things. That's a good quality in a child like her." A child like her. The phrase echoed. Hannah had confronted Ethan afterward. "Do you think they even realize how obvious it is?" she asked. He looked pained. "I don't think they mean to be hurtful, I think they just connect more with Lily. She's their biological granddaughter." "That shouldn't matter," Hannah said, her voice tightening. "I know," Ethan replied quietly. "I'll talk to them." And he did. After the Christmas gift incident, he sat his parents down and asked them as directly as he could to treat both girls with equal love and attention. "Madison is my daughter," he told them firmly. "In every way that matters. She has our name, our home, our hearts." "Of course," Robert had replied smoothly. "You know we love them both." "You're being overly sensitive," Eleanor added with a light laugh. "We just know Lily's preferences better, that's all." But the pattern continued. At Easter, they hosted a backyard egg hunt. When the girls emptied their baskets, Lily's had nearly double the treats: more golden eggs, more toys, more plastic coins that Eleanor claimed had been hidden randomly. At Thanksgiving, Lily was seated between the grandparents and asked all about school and her ballet recital. Ava sat across the table, her plate quietly untouched, unnoticed. Afterward in the car, Ava asked Hannah in a small voice, "Why doesn't Grandma Eleanor ever ask me to bake cookies with her like she does with Lily?" Hannah's heart cracked. "I don't know, sweetheart," she said softly. "But that doesn't mean she doesn't care." She hated herself a little for lying. But what else was she supposed to say? That some people couldn't see past blood, that even adults played favorites. So she tried to compensate. She and Ethan created special family days just for the 3 of them. Movie nights, pancake Saturdays, craft days where Ava got to pick the project. Ethan remained loving and devoted, always aware of Ava's emotions but still reluctant to confront his parents too strongly. "They're from another generation," he'd say. "They'll come around." But Hannah wasn't so sure anymore. Because Ava was beginning to notice more than just the unequal gifts or attention. She was beginning to internalize it. One evening after another family gathering where Lily had been fawned over and Ava barely acknowledged, Hannah found her daughter sitting alone in her room hugging Mr. Flopsy tight. "Do I remind them of someone they didn't like?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Hannah blinked. "What? Of course not. Why would you say that?" "Because Grandma said I don't look like anyone in the family," Ava murmured. "And she always says Lily has the Henderson smile." That night, Hannah lay awake for hours staring at the ceiling, her hands clenched under the blanket. What did you do when the hurt wasn't loud, when the bruises were invisible, delivered not through slaps but silence? How do you protect a child from the subtle erosion of her self-worth? You fight. Quietly at first, but you fight. And Hannah would. The week before the business trip had already been unusually tense, even before the flights were booked and bags packed. Ava had been quieter than usual, still polite, still helpful, but not her usual self. Less chatter over breakfast. Fewer questions about the birds in the yard or the shapes of clouds. It wasn't obvious at first, but mothers know. There's a subtle shift in a child's presence when something begins to weigh on their heart. One night after dinner, Hannah found Ava sitting on her bed, legs crossed, Mr. Flopsy in her lap. The room was dim except for the soft pink glow of her reading lamp. Hannah sat beside her and began brushing out the tangles in her hair, their usual nighttime ritual. But Ava's shoulders were rigid. "Mommy," she asked softly. "Yes, baby. Am I your real daughter?" The question landed like a stone dropped into still water, heavy, disruptive, impossible to ignore. Hannah's hands stilled mid-stroke. She placed the brush down and turned so they were eye to eye. "Of course you are. Why would you ask that?" Ava shrugged, staring down at the rabbit's worn ear. "Grandma said Lily has the Henderson chin and the Henderson smile. And I don't have any of those. She said I look like someone who doesn't belong in family pictures." A chill ran through Hannah's spine. "What else did she say?" Hannah asked, gently, careful not to sound alarmed. Ava hesitated, then added, "She said I should be grateful you took me in, because most people wouldn't have." Hannah swallowed the rising anger and pulled Ava into her arms. "You are my daughter in every way that matters," she whispered into her curls. "You don't have to earn your place here. You already belong forever." But the words, no matter how sincere, couldn't erase what had been planted. In the days that followed, the slights continued. Small things but relentless in their weight. At a family cookout, Eleanor insisted Lily wear a special flower crown because she's the only real Henderson girl. When Ava reached for the photo props to join the pictures, Eleanor gently pulled her hand back. "Maybe just the cousins this time, sweetie," she said, as if Ava wasn't one of them. Later, when Lily knocked over a glass of lemonade, both girls were blamed at first. But Ava was the one asked to clean it up alone, while Lily skipped away to play with a new toy gifted to her just that morning. "It's not a punishment," Eleanor had said smoothly. "It's just about teaching responsibility." But Ava knew better. And so did Hannah. The real breaking point came one quiet evening while Hannah was organizing laundry and Ava was doing her homework. Hannah noticed her daughter had become oddly secretive with a small pink notebook, a gift from a classmate. She'd glance up, tuck it under her pillow, and change the subject when asked what she was writing. Later that night, after Ava had fallen asleep clutching Mr. Flopsy, Hannah quietly lifted the pillow. The journal was there, the pages softly dog-eared and filled with Ava's careful looping handwriting. She hesitated. It felt like a violation to read it, but something in her mother's heart urged her on. She turned to the most recent page and read, "Sometimes I think I am just a guest in this house. Like I'm staying for a while, but I don't live here for real. Grandma says I'm lucky, but it doesn't feel lucky. It feels like I'm pretending all the time. Lily gets hugs and pictures and treats. I get chores and rules and silence. Maybe I'm not really part of the family. Maybe Mom loves her more. Maybe I was a mistake that got kept by accident." Today she smiled at Lily when Lily made a joke. "I made one too, but no one heard me. I felt like a ghost. Maybe if I disappeared they'd just move on. Maybe they'd be happier. I'm trying to be good. I promise I'm trying. But sometimes it feels like no matter how good I am, I'm still not enough." Hannah sat on the edge of the bed, tears slipping down her cheeks as she held the journal close to her chest. She wasn't angry at Ava for writing it. She was devastated that Ava had to feel it at all. These weren't the wounds of dramatic betrayal. They were paper cuts, small, sharp, and frequent. The kind of pain no one else notices until the bleeding won't stop. She had underestimated the damage of being consistently overlooked, subtly dismissed, gently erased. This wasn't about one incident or one cruel word. This was a pattern. A quiet war against her daughter's sense of self. That night, Hannah didn't sleep. She lay awake beside Ava, who had shifted closer in her sleep, seeking warmth. She studied her daughter's face in the moonlight, the delicate curve of her nose, the freckles scattered across her cheeks, the slight furrow between her brows that appeared when she dreamed. She kissed Ava's forehead and made a silent vow. This ends now. She wouldn't wait for another slight. She wouldn't excuse it anymore as generational or unintentional. The next time Eleanor or Robert tried to marginalize her daughter, she would not be silent. Love wasn't passive, it was action. And Hannah would act. Because no child should lie awake wondering if they were enough. And especially not hers. By the time the Chicago trip came up, Hannah had already been avoiding it for months. The client, a massive consumer tech brand with a notoriously fickle PR team, was a white whale her department had been chasing for nearly a year. And now finally the chance had come to close the deal. Her boss called it a career-defining moment. To Hannah, it felt like a personal betrayal to even consider leaving Ava, especially now. She tried to reschedule. She begged to zoom in. But the answer was clear: be there or risk everything you've built. At home, she wavered. Ava had been more withdrawn lately. She still smiled, still obeyed, but it was like her light had dimmed by a few degrees. Hannah had noticed it even more since reading that heartbreaking journal entry. She didn't want to leave now, not when Ava so clearly needed safety, presence, and certainty. Still, work didn't pause for motherly instinct. And Ethan, bless him, had promised to hold down the fort. "We'll be okay," he'd said, kissing her forehead while she sat on the edge of the bed with her laptop open and 4 packing cubes undone. "Daddy-daughter weekend. We'll finally build that birdhouse. You'll remember dance class pickup. And she's supposed to bring a fruit snack on Friday. I've got it. Pink lunchbox. Orange slices. Hair in a bun. I swear." Hannah had laughed softly, her heart still tight. She looked over at Ava curled up on the couch with Mr. Flopsy, pretending not to listen, but definitely listening. "Mommy's gonna miss you," Hannah said gently. "I'll miss you too," Ava murmured. "But I'll help Daddy be responsible." That night, Hannah hugged her daughter extra long, the unease in her chest like static she couldn't quite shake. Then everything unraveled. 2 days before her flight, Ethan got a call from Boston. An account on the verge of imploding. A long-standing client threatening to walk. And as the senior relationship manager, he couldn't delegate this one. He had to go immediately. "Maybe I can stay behind," Hannah said quickly, already pulling up the airline app. "You go. I'll cancel the pitch." But Ethan had already started to shake his head. You can't miss Chicago. You've worked too hard for this. We'll figure something out." Their regular babysitter was away at college. The neighbor who usually helped was already booked. Hannah's mother, who lived in Arizona, had just undergone knee surgery and couldn't fly. That's when Ethan suggested the unthinkable. "My parents. They've been asking to spend more time with Ava anyway. Maybe this is the opportunity." Hannah's stomach dropped. "I don't know. I know how you feel," he said, quickly wrapping his arms around her waist. "And you're not wrong to worry. But maybe this is exactly what they need, some one-on-one time. Without Lily around, a few days where they actually have to show up and connect. They've shown me who they are," Hannah said, her voice tight. "I've seen the way they treat her. This isn't new, Ethan. But maybe it can still change," he countered. "They've made mistakes, yes. But they're capable adults. They raised 2 sons. It's not like they're going to neglect her." The word neglect made her flinch. "It's just 3 days," he added gently. "We'll both be home by the weekend. We'll check in constantly. If anything feels off, we'll end it early." "They don't even like me," Hannah whispered. "They think I'm the reason you settled. What if they take it out on her when I'm not there?" Ethan hesitated. "They know Ava is my daughter. Legally, emotionally, every way that matters. They'd never. I mean, they wouldn't." He stopped himself. But the hesitation was enough. Still, they had no other options. And somewhere beneath the fear, Hannah felt a small, desperate hope rise. Maybe, she thought, maybe if they're forced to be alone with her, they'll finally see her, the real her. And maybe, just maybe, they'll love her. That Thursday morning, Hannah packed Ava's overnight bag with meticulous care. Her favorite pajamas, the purple toothbrush, 3 extra pairs of socks. She kissed Mr. Flopsy before placing him inside. Eleanor and Robert arrived 15 minutes late with tightly packed suitcases, and Eleanor's eyes glued to her phone. "We've got everything under control," Eleanor said breezily, barely making eye contact. "We raised 2 boys. 1 little girl will be a breeze," Robert added with a tight smile. Hannah knelt beside Ava. "Remember, I'll call every night, okay, and Daddy will be home before me." Ava nodded bravely. "I'll be good for Grandma and Grandpa. I'll help. I won't spill anything." "You don't need to help with anything," Hannah said, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "You're a kid. Your job is to be loved and happy." I'll be okay, Ava whispered. I promise. But Hannah could see the slight tremble in her fingers the way her eyes kept darting to Eleanor's unmoved silhouette. She almost pulled the plug right then. Almost said, screw the client, screw the pitch, screw the career. But the pressure, financial, professional, emotional, closed in like walls. So she hugged Ava hard. I love you more than all the stars in the sky. Love you to the moon and back. Ava replied automatically, her voice quiet. And then Hannah walked out the door. She wouldn't know until much later that this was the last time Ava would feel safe that week. The client signed early. That's what changed everything. 2 days into her trip, after a whirlwind of presentations, corporate dinners, and endless handshakes, Hannah received the news. Contract confirmed. Final meetings canceled. While her colleagues celebrated with champagne and plans for sightseeing, all Hannah could think about was Ava. The last 2 video calls had been unsettling. Ava looked tired, her usual sparkle dulled, and when Hannah asked to speak with her the second night, Eleanor had brushed her off with a tight, annoyed tone. She's already asleep. She was fussy all day, let her rest. Something had gnawed at Hannah ever since, so when the opportunity came, she didn't hesitate. She booked the next available flight back to Portland, deciding not to tell anyone she was coming home. She wanted to surprise Ava, imagine the joy, the squeal, the tight hug around her waist. Maybe she'd relieve Ethan's parents early, bring Ava ice cream, and turn this week around. But what Hannah found instead would stay with her for the rest of her life. When she pulled into the driveway that Thursday afternoon, the house was still. Eleanor and Robert's car was gone. That struck her as strange, but maybe they'd taken Ava for a treat. She grabbed her bag and opened the front door, calling out, Ava, Mommy's home, surprise. There was no answer. The air inside felt too quiet, like it had been holding its breath. She walked through the living room, her eyes scanning the space, and then froze. Mr. Flopsy lay on the floor face down and alone. Ava never went anywhere without her beloved bunny. A wave of dread swept over Hannah as she called again, louder now. Ava. She moved quickly from room to room, panic rising with each unanswered call. Then she heard a faint sound from the kitchen. Scrubbing. Sniffling. Hannah's heels clicked against the floor as she rushed in. What she saw stopped her in her tracks. Ava was on her hands and knees scrubbing the kitchen tile with a large bristle brush. A bucket of soapy water sat beside her, her tiny hands red and raw. Her curls were damp with sweat, cheeks streaked with dried tears, and she was wearing the same clothes from the last video call. She didn't notice Hannah at first, so focused was she on the task. Her movements were slow, methodical, and heartbreaking. Ava, Hannah said, her voice barely a whisper. Ava startled, the brush slipping from her grip and clattering to the tile. She turned her eyes wide and momentarily afraid, as though unsure if she was in trouble. And then recognition. Mommy, she breathed, voice shaky. Hannah dropped to her knees, not caring that her business slacks soaked up the water. She pulled Ava into her arms and felt the small, trembling body melt against her. Baby, what's going on? Why are you cleaning the floor? Where are Grandma and Grandpa? Ava didn't answer at first. Her lower lip trembled. I spilled grape juice this morning, she whispered finally. It made a big mess. Grandma said I had to clean the whole floor before dinner. She said I needed to learn responsibility. Hannah pulled back slightly, looking into her daughter's eyes. The whole kitchen, Ava nodded. Where are they now? They took Lily to Adventure World, she said, barely audible. Grandma said I couldn't go because I don't appreciate things. She said Lily deserves special treats because she's their real granddaughter. The words hit Hannah like a gut punch. Her hands tightened around Ava's shoulders. They left you here alone. Ava nodded again, small and ashamed. Grandma said if the floor wasn't spotless by dinner, I wouldn't get dessert, and I should think about why I'm so clumsy. Hannah could hardly see through the tears blurring her vision. How long have you been alone? Since breakfast, Ava murmured. They said they'd be back for dinner. 4 hours, alone. Kneeling on tile. Hannah's heart broke and burned all at once. Has this happened before? She asked, forcing calm into her voice. Ava hesitated. Yesterday, they went shopping with Lily. I wasn't allowed. Grandma said I whined too much. Hannah shut her eyes, fighting for control. Did she hurt you? She grabbed my arm when I dropped a plate, Ava said. It left a bruise. But it was my fault. I'm always messing up. No, Hannah said, firm now. No, sweetheart. You're not messing up. You're being a child. They're the ones who messed up. Then came the worst question of all, quiet, almost an afterthought. Do you think they don't like me because I'm not really their family? Hannah felt something in her soul collapse. Oh, baby, she whispered. They don't treat you badly because of who you are. They treat you badly because of what they are. Small. Wrong. Broken. But you are my daughter. You are perfect. You are enough. Ava nodded, but the wound was deeper than words. That night, Hannah ran her a warm bath, cleaned her raw little palms, rubbed lotion onto her knees, and wrapped her in her softest pajamas. She made hot cocoa. She tucked Mr. Flopsy in beside her. She kissed her forehead a dozen times. And when Ava finally fell asleep safe in her bed, Hannah stood in the hallway trembling with fury and clarity. This wasn't just a parenting failure by two old people stuck in their ways. This was emotional neglect. This was trauma. This was enough. Tomorrow she would deal with them. But tonight she would sit by her daughter's side, watch her sleep, and promise her one thing: no one, not even blood, would ever make her feel less than again. When the front door opened just after 6, laughter spilled in like a wave of wrongness. Eleanor entered first, arms full of shopping bags emblazoned with the Adventure World logo, her face flushed with cheerful triumph. Robert followed, carrying a sleepy-looking Lily on his shoulders, her cheeks still painted with a fading butterfly from the amusement park's face painting booth. None of them noticed Hannah standing in the center of the living room until she cleared her throat. Eleanor gasped, nearly dropping a bag. Amber, good heavens, you scared me. What are you doing home? Robert's brow furrowed. Where's Ava? He asked, setting Lily gently down. Hannah's voice was calm but icy. She's upstairs, resting. After spending 4 hours on her knees scrubbing the kitchen floor, the words landed like a slap. Eleanor blinked. Don't be dramatic. She spilled juice. We told her to clean it up. It's called teaching responsibility. Responsibility, Hannah repeated, eyes hard. She's 8. You left her alone for hours while you took your biological granddaughter to an amusement park. And you're calling that discipline? Robert stepped forward, trying for reason. Now let's not exaggerate. She was being difficult, throwing a tantrum this morning. She told me. She apologized immediately, Hannah said, and she still got punished like a servant. She wasn't just cleaning a spill, she was scrubbing the entire floor in silence, terrified. That's not discipline. That's cruelty. Eleanor's lips curled with irritation. Honestly, she has a flair for the dramatic. And, let's be real, she's not exactly. She trailed off. Hannah stepped closer. Not exactly what Eleanor lifted her chin. She's not family by blood, she doesn't have Henderson in her. We've tried. But you can't force a connection that isn't there. Hannah stared at her for a long moment. Then she pulled out her phone. Ethan, she said when he picked up. They're here. Put me on speaker. His voice came through low and steady. Hannah did. Ethan's voice filled the room. Mom. Dad. Let me be perfectly clear. Ava is my daughter. Not adopted. Not honorary. Not temporary. My daughter. And no one, not even you, has the right to make her feel like she's less. Ethan, Eleanor cut in, all wounded pride. You're overreacting. We just wanted to give Lily a special day. That's natural. She's our real granddaughter. Real? Ethan's voice was sharp now. You think blood makes someone real. You think DNA teaches you to love a child. Ava has my last name. She has my bedtime routine memorized. She has drawings of our family on her bedroom wall. She knows how I take my coffee and how to cheer me up when I have a bad day. She is real in every way that matters. And the way you've treated her, not just this week but for years, is inexcusable. Robert sighed heavily. This is absurd. One incident and suddenly we're monsters. It's not one incident, Hannah said. It's the comments. The favoritism, the exclusions. The fact that she wrote in her journal that maybe she doesn't belong here, maybe she was a mistake. That didn't come from nowhere. Eleanor looked away. She's sensitive. She's human, Hannah snapped. And she's a child. Children believe what adults tell them. And what you've told her is that she's not enough. Ethan's voice dropped lower, quieter. You're not safe for her. Not right now. We'll talk about supervised visits in the future, but this ends now. Eleanor's expression twisted. We're your parents, and I'm hers, Ethan said, and my job is to protect her. Even from you. Hannah looked straight at them, her tone cold steel wrapped in velvet. You may share Ethan's blood, but we choose who our family is every single day. And you chose wrong. Robert said nothing. Eleanor's voice trembled with fury. After everything we've done for you, blood doesn't teach you how to love, Hannah interrupted softly. But love can teach you how to be family. And you never bothered to learn. There was a long silence. Lily tugged at Robert's sleeve, confused. Is Ava mad at me? She whispered. Hannah knelt. No, sweetheart. This isn't about you. You didn't do anything wrong. Eleanor's face darkened. You're tearing this family apart. No, Hannah replied. You did that the moment you decided only one child was worth loving. And with that, she opened the door. It's time for you to go. They left in silence, doors slamming, tires screeching. But in the living room where Mr. Flopsy still waited on the floor, something shifted. Peace for the first time in days settled in. The silence after Eleanor and Robert left was deafening, like the air in the house had been holding its breath and could finally exhale. Hannah didn't move at first. She stood by the front door, one hand still on the knob, heart pounding, not with fear anymore but with the rush of certainty that comes after a hard but necessary choice. Upstairs, Ava was still asleep, unaware of the storm that had just passed through her home. And for the first time in a long while, Hannah felt like the house was truly hers again. Ethan's flight arrived around midnight. Hannah met him at the door, and when he saw her face streaked with exhaustion and emotion, he dropped his bag and held her tight without a word. They sat at the kitchen table, the same floor Ava had been forced to scrub, and Hannah recounted everything. The floor, the bruise, the words. They left her alone, Ethan, she said, her voice breaking. Like she was no one. He buried his face in his hands, shaking with rage. I'll never forgive them for this. And yet, forgiveness wasn't even the first hurdle. The following days were filled with fallout. Eleanor and Robert didn't go quietly. They called. They texted. They played the victim in family group chats. By the end of the week, extended relatives were chiming in, some urging reconciliation, others asking for the full story. Most didn't want to believe what Hannah and Ethan said. They were just trying to help, one aunt insisted. Ava is sensitive, another cousin offered, dismissive. But Michael, Ethan's younger brother and Lily's father, made a different call. He asked to meet in private. Over coffee, he looked Ethan in the eye and said, Lily told me a few things. About the chores. About being left alone. I didn't want to believe it. But now, he trailed off ashamed. I should have seen it. That moment of acknowledgement mattered. So did what came next. Michael offered to mediate contact between Lily and Ava, and over the next few weeks the cousins had short, supervised video calls. Their bond, fragile but real, became a small light in the middle of the wreckage. But Hannah knew that Ava needed more than just apologies or distance. She needed healing. Real professional healing. So they found a therapist, Dr. Lorraine Carter, a woman who specialized in adoption and childhood trauma. Ava was shy at first, quiet and reserved, clinging to Mr. Flopsy in every session. She didn't want to talk about Eleanor or the floor or the park, but she drew pictures. And in those pictures, she was always standing at the edge of the frame. Never in the middle. Never in the center. One day she said softly, I thought maybe I was the problem. That I was too much. Hannah's heart shattered all over again. Why would you think that Ava didn't look up? Because they smiled when I wasn't there. That night Hannah and Ethan lay awake, staring at the ceiling. She's not just hurt, Hannah whispered. She's internalized it. She thinks she's a burden. Ethan reached for her hand. We're going to show her every single day that she's not. So they began again. They created new traditions: Friday night pancakes, Sunday night gratitude jars. They let Ava pick the color for her new bedsheets, helped her paint her room a soft lavender. They invited her into the center of everything. Slowly, the drawings changed. Ava began putting herself in the middle again, between Hannah and Ethan, holding both their hands. In one session, Dr. Carter asked Ava, "What does family mean to you now?" Ava paused for a long time. Then she said, "It means you don't have to be born in the same place to belong in the same home." Hannah cried the moment they got to the car. It wasn't perfect. Ava still flinched when doors slammed. She still asked sometimes, "Do Grandma and Grandpa hate me?" But the difference was now she asked instead of assuming. Now she left room for someone to tell her, "No, sweetie. They were wrong. Not you." And in saying that over and over, Hannah and Ethan began healing too, because trauma doesn't just cut the child. It wounds the parents who weren't there in time, who didn't see the signs, who believed the best in people who never deserved their trust. Healing they learned wasn't just for Ava, it was for them too. It didn't happen all at once, but slowly, like spring returning after a long, cruel winter, Ava began to smile again. Not the tentative, tight-lipped smile of someone unsure if they were allowed joy, but the full-faced kind that reached her eyes, that crinkled her nose, that made her giggle at the end. It showed up first on a Wednesday afternoon when she asked if they could paint together. Then on a Sunday when she belted out a silly song in the car without fear of being shushed. Little moments blooming one by one, each a sign that something inside her was healing. Hannah and Ethan noticed everything. They celebrated every flicker of confidence like a small miracle, because for a long time, Ava had lived in the shadows of almost enough. Now she was stepping into her own light. Dr. Carter had warned them, children who've been made to feel small often need permission to take up space again. So they gave Ava all the space she wanted. She began choosing her own outfits in the morning, mismatched socks and all, and decorating her room with hand-drawn signs that said things like "Ava's ideas only" and "No bullies, just bunnies." Ethan built her a reading nook in the corner with twinkly lights and a beanbag shaped like a strawberry. Hannah put a calendar on the fridge with Ava's name on every Sunday. Pancake CEO. Ava in charge. One night, as Hannah was folding laundry, she found a small envelope on her pillow. Ava's handwriting was unmistakable, a little loopy, a little crooked, perfectly Ava. She opened it carefully. "Dear Mom," it read, "thank you for always picking me even when I didn't come from your tummy. I think some people don't know what real family is. But you do. Love, Ava." Hannah sat on the edge of the bed, the letter pressed to her chest, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. There were 1,000 things she could have said in return, but in that moment all she could think was, she gets it. She really gets it. The truth was, family wasn't a default setting. It was a choice. A vow made and remade each day, in the way you show up for someone when it's easy and especially when it's not. Lily and Ava continued their bond from afar. Michael arranged weekly video calls between the cousins, and their laughter echoed through the living room like sunlight through glass. They drew pictures together, showed off Lego builds, even created a secret cousin handshake they practiced through the screen. Ava never asked about Eleanor and Robert unless prompted. But when she did, it was with curiosity, not fear. "Do you think Grandma is still mad at me?" she asked one night as she peeled carrots next to Hannah. "No," Hannah replied, "but even if she is, that's her job to fix, not yours." Ava nodded, then said something that stunned Hannah with its quiet wisdom. "I think people who love you right know how to make you feel safe." The following week, Dr. Carter brought up a milestone Ava had achieved in therapy, expressing her needs without guilt. "She's beginning to trust that her place in the family is permanent," she explained. "That she doesn't have to earn it every day." Hannah and Ethan knew the road ahead was still long. Rebuilding a child's sense of safety wasn't a destination, it was a daily choice. But Ava was leading the way now, not just surviving, but blooming. Her schoolwork improved. Her dance recital that spring brought the house to its feet. She began to make new friends, real friends, the kind she invited over with pride. That night, after the recital, as Ethan tucked her into bed, Ava whispered, "Can we always stay this way? Just us?" Ethan smiled and brushed a curl behind her ear. "Always," he promised. "No matter what. Because some families are built, not born." And when built with love, with intention, with fierce, unwavering protection, they can withstand anything. Ava's 9th birthday arrived not with fanfare but with a quiet promise written across the morning sky, the kind of sunlight that gently warms the skin without blinding, like a whisper, that today would matter more than any day before. It had been nearly a year since the kitchen floor incident, and the house now breathed differently, lighter, more open, filled with unspoken but felt safety. Hannah had spent weeks preparing, not obsessing over decorations or themes, but curating something far more sacred, a memory that would overwrite the ache of everything Ava had endured. The living room glowed with soft lights, paper butterflies fluttered above the cake table, and a handmade banner spelled out the words, "You are chosen, always." Each guest who arrived that afternoon brought more than gifts. They brought love, witness, and a kind of quiet redemption for a girl who once questioned her place in the world. Michael came early with Lily, who skipped inside holding a framed photo she and Ava had drawn together, two stick figures in crowns, holding hands under a rainbow labeled "Cousins for Life." The sight of it made Hannah's breath catch. And then, as expected but no longer dreaded, Eleanor and Robert appeared at the door, their presence subdued, almost hesitant, like ghosts knocking to see if the living would let them in. Hannah met them with grace, not warmth, but not anger either. She didn't need to relitigate the past. She'd already chosen her side, and her daughter stood at the center of it. "She knows you're coming," she said simply. "She said she'll come find you when she's ready." Inside, laughter echoed from the backyard where a bubble machine sent iridescent dreams into the sky. Ava wore a yellow dress, sunflowers printed along the hem, and a clip in her hair shaped like a star. When she finally approached her grandparents, the entire room seemed to still, not from fear but reverence, as though watching something sacred unfold. Eleanor rose slowly from a chair, the lines on her face deeper, as if the months apart had aged her more than expected. "Ava," she said, voice uncertain, "I've come today not just to celebrate you but to say something long overdue. I'm sorry. For not loving you the way you deserve. For making you feel like less. That wasn't your fault. That was mine." There was no dramatic pause, no expectation of forgiveness, just words laid down like stones on a riverbank, an attempt to rebuild what had been so carelessly broken. Ava looked at her for a long time, her face unreadable, then said softly, "I forgive you. But that doesn't mean I forget. It means I'm done carrying the heavy stuff around." Eleanor's eyes welled. Robert lowered his gaze. And then Ava turned and skipped away to join Lily at the cupcake table, her laughter, loud and full, echoing not because she wanted to be heard but because she no longer feared being invisible. That evening, after the last guest had left and the stars blinked quietly overhead, Hannah climbed the stairs to Ava's room where streamers still fluttered and the smell of frosting lingered in the air. Ava was already in bed, Mr. Flopsy tucked beside her, eyelids heavy with joy. Hannah sat beside her, brushing hair from her forehead. "Was it a good birthday?" she whispered. Ava nodded. "It was the first one I didn't feel like I had to earn." Hannah's throat tightened. "You never did," she whispered. "You just had to receive it." In the hallway, Ethan waited with a camera full of moments, Ava blowing out candles, Ava dancing to her own made-up songs. Ava hugging Lily with the kind of abandon only children allow. He slid his arm around Hannah's waist. "We did good," he said. "We're not done," Hannah replied, her voice quiet but steady. "But we're doing it right now." Later that night, as Hannah sat alone in the living room flipping through birthday cards and half-written notes, she found another letter tucked under her pillow, Ava's handwriting small and looping. "Dear Mom," it read, "thank you for always choosing me even when you didn't have to. Some people think families are made with blood. I think they're made with love and pancakes and bedtime songs. That's how I know we're real." Hannah wept not from sorrow but from something deeper, the recognition that their story, their imperfect, jagged, beautiful story, had not only survived but had become something worthy of telling. And in that quiet moment she realized this wasn't just a happy ending, it was a beginning. Because love, when chosen again and again, doesn't just mend what's broken, it builds something stronger than blood. So if you're listening, wondering whether you're enough, whether your version of family is valid, whether the pain you felt can be rewritten, let Ava's story be your proof. Love doesn't need DNA to be real. It just needs to show up. Every day. even in the messy parts.